Hi, welcome to episode 2 of Cracking the Codex for Dark Angels. This week we are looking at the Company of Hunters. This is the Ravenwing themed detachment. How are you feeling about this one, John?
Yeah, so to me it was quite exciting. I wanted to see if there is mechanically a reason to take this over Stormlance and
Mm,
kind of drill into that. Because to me, at the moment, if you're playing a Ravenwing kind of skew, that's where I'd go because there's obviously the mounted enhancements and stratagems, but we shall see.
yeah. We did come up with a niche that you've probably worked out after seeing the title, but I think this is the most aggressive way you can play Space Marines. This is maybe, one of the few armies in the game that can put forwards a really aggressive turn 1 alpha strike. So it'll be quite interesting to see how well that pans out. So, we have got Company of Hunters. What does that get you? As always, Oath a Moment. As we all know, pick one unit in your opponent's army in your command phase, and until the start of your next command phase, you get to reroll all hits against that unit with all of your models that are Space Marines. Nice and easy. There's also the Unforgiven. Basically just means if you're playing Dark Angels through taking one of the detachments or taking one of their special characters, it stops you from running, for example, Blood Angels characters.
Boo. I'm going to say that every week.
Well, I'd quite like to run Death Company in all of my lists at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Then we've also got the Ravenwing keyword. This is on, obviously, the data sheets you'd expect it to be, such as the Black Knights, but it's also on all mounted units that the Dark Angels can take, and all vehicle units that can fly. So, what do you get as your detachment trait? You get Master of Maneuvers. And this isn't limited just to your Ravenwing, it isn't limited to just your mounted and your vehicle with fly units. This is all of your Space Marines. They can shoot in a turn in which they advanced or fell back. What we're seeing from list writing at the moment for Space Marines is the detachments that do well are the ones that have movement baked in. Normally it's advance and charge, but advance and shoot is it's another angle that you can take a very aggressive take the game into your own hands and get those early pressure leads. You also get Outrider units as battle line. I don't know that you want to run 6 of them, but maybe there's something interesting you can do with that, and
Yeah,
some sort of mad mounted skew.
they are
I'll be
cheap
honest.
enough as well. They're
Yeah,
cheap, but I don't think that's the quality to them.
I haven't put a list on the table that's just 6 max squads of Outriders. I don't think I'm going to.
No.
But if you
Shame.
want to, let us know how you get on, because
Yeah.
it sounds fun at the very least.
Yeah, and ATVs might get an even further points drop, and we may still not see them on the table.
That is true. So, what else do you get for the detachment, enhancement wise? First one, this is the swing and a miss for me. Mastercrafted weapon, only 10 points, goes on a Ravenwing model only, same as all of them, and all of the melee weapons equipped by the bearer have precision. This is incredibly meh, because there is the strat for 1 CP to give a character precision in the fight phase.
Yeah, and there's only 2 models that this could technically join,
Yeah.
be attached to. So that is a chaplain on a bike or
Yep.
the Ravenwing Command Squad, because there is the Ravenwing Champion. So you've got 2 options.
And neither of them I'm super excited about having it on.
No.
And if I wanted to have precision on either of them, I'd just spend a CP in the fight phase. Secondly, though, we have got Mounted Strategist. This is fantastic. So the bearer's unit is eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which it advanced or fell back. So obviously, detachment-wise, you can shoot after advancing and falling back. This gives you the flexibility of also getting into combat. You also see this ability on Samael. So if you want to, you can go 2 very aggressive units, probably Black Knights, give them both the ability to advance, shoot, and charge as well. But being able to pick this up and have some flexibility where it goes is very nice. Thirdly, we have got Master of Maneuvers. It's a lot of text, and I will acknowledge that some events are ruling this differently to others. But what it effectively means is your unit treats the round as 1 round higher when you come in from strategic reserve. In my eyes, this seems very clear. It allows a turn 1 outflank outside of your opponent's deployment zone, coming in from strategic reserves, and on turn 2, you can come in from their deployment zone. If that's how your events are running it, I think it's a very good enhancement. If that's not how they're running it, I don't think this is worthwhile at all. You're
Yeah.
going to be putting it on a brick of Black Knights. That brick of Black Knights will not fit into your opponent's deployment zone. Like, we make the joke about my intent was to screen out a monolith. They have a bigger footprint than a monolith when you've got 9 bikes. It is a
Yeah.
big, beefy unit. So if your events allow you to use this to turn 1, come in 6 inches from the board edge, fantastic. If not, probably give this one a miss. And then finally, we've got Recon Hunter. This is my favorite. This is what, to me, makes the list concept of going very aggressive tick. It gives the models in the bearer's unit scout 9 inches. What this means is you can deploy on the line near some forward screening ruin that's probably covering one of the mid-board objectives. If you go second, you scout behind terrain. If you go first, you drive 9 inches towards your opponent. And then next turn, you drive closer to your opponent. I think this is fantastic. It's only 20 points as well. I think this is the standout enhancement for me. How are you feeling about the enhancement, Sean?
I think they're cool toys
Mm,
that very much lean into how you're going to want to play the army. There is
sure.
not any kind of. It doesn't feel like there's some of the weird kind of flexibility, kind of context dependent ones that you get in some of the detachments, which is kind of a relief because these seem a bit more generalist. Which I think I'd want to see more enhancements across future codices that do the same sort of thing. Because there's nothing worse than going, that one's nice if that one in a blue moon thing happens, or a negative
Mm,
thing like you can explode by default type of thing. It's like it's all or it's those sorts of situational ones that I just go, if I'm planning to have that, that
yeah,
means the game's probably going wrong. So
sure, sure. I think they really point you in the direction of going very aggressive on turn 1, which is, I
yeah,
think, how this detachment functions. And it's a niche that other Space Marine lists and detachments I don't think can lean into. So it'll be interesting to see how well that works out. Stratagems, then. This is another Space Marine detachment with 4 battle tactics. There is no captain on bike. So this is only a negative because it means that people can increase the cost of 4 of your stratagems.
yeah.
Maybe that's a blessing, to be honest, because otherwise they'd just be hitting Armor of Contempt every turn, and Armor of Contempt is very good. But yes, so stratagem wise, first of all, we've got Armor of Contempt. You know it, you love it. You incoming attacks in that phase are at -1 AP. Makes your unit more tanky. Very nice when you've got quite chunky models like pikes, especially the Outriders if you do go for any of them, because they are beefy. Secondly, we've got Death on the Wind. This is in your shooting phase. You select one unit that's just shot, and it forces an enemy unit to take a battle shock test, one of the enemy units that has been shot by. If you've got a Raven Wing unit within 6 inches of it, it's -1 from the test. This is fine. I don't love it. It's You can kind of key up some gotcha moments by shooting maybe some Outriders into a unit, forcing them to take a battle shock. They fail the battle shock, then you shoot a big unit at them and they're not able to use a defensive stratagem, or setting you up to, prevent your opponents from using defensive stratagems in the fight phase.
Yeah.
I don't love this. It also lets you, get end of game or end of turn scoring for secondaries potentially. So there is some utility there, but it's not one that I see myself using every game.
I think, like you just hit on, it's you. If you got something close up to the target unit, you hit it, and then the stuff that might be outside of range for those defensive strats that make things a lone op,
Mm,
that sort of situation where you're just not quite in, that could really help because
yeah,
there's nothing worse than you going, "That's my oath moment target," and then you line up all your shooting, it's not quite close enough, and then they go, "No, I'll go strat," and you're like, "Cool, your turn." And when this army is that kind of almost a one note thing of I'm going headlong and shooting at you, you need the shooting to count.
sure. Next up, we've got High Speed Focus. This is, speaking of the Nurgle strat, not quite as good, but still pretty snazzy. When an enemy selects a Raven Wing unit in the shooting phase, you can give them -1 to hit.
Yeah,
Nice to have conditionally. I'm not sure when I want to use this over Armor of Contempt, to be honest, but there's probably going to be some times maybe you really need a unit to survive, so you double slam Armor of Contempt and High Speed
yeah.
Focus. Um, And then finally, in terms of the battle tactics, we've got rapid reappraisal. This is at the end of your opponent's fight phase. You select one Raven Wing unit that is not within engagement range of an enemy unit, and then you put it into strategic reserves. These stratagems are good whenever they come up. Again, you won't necessarily be
Yeah.
using it every time with this unit, this army, but I think the sort of list that you might build with this army, you don't have a huge number of chaff units. So being able to pick up a unit that's away from the fighting, and sure, it's a bike unit, so it can still go pretty quickly, but being able to go from one side of the board to the other on your turn is there's definitely something to be said there.
Or a storm speeder or a plane. There's still other options as well.
That
Those
is
niche
true.
times where you've suddenly got a storm speeder on there, like just behind their big L in their home deployment zone.
Yeah,
Could be
I
fun.
guess this is a good point, a good time to talk about the fact that the Storm Raven, being a vehicle that can fly, is something that you might want to put in your lists. It has quite a lot of DACA, but with the way that I was going to say airplanes, the way that what do they call aircraft? There we go.
Aircraft.
The way aircraft or airplanes function in 10th edition is that you move them and then you pivot at the end of the movement. So if you move an aircraft and then pivot it, and then on your opponent's turn they move, so you're actually not going to be able to get its guns to bear anywhere meaningful. Having a sort of, oh, I've mispositioned button where you can pick it up and then in your turn bring it down 6 inches away from the board edge and just go, cool, I'm just going to shoot you from here. I can see that being useful. I prefer to just position it correctly, but it's nice to have as a backup option there.
Yeah.
We do have two other strats. Neither of these are battle tactics, but we've got Hunter's Trail. So in the command phase, you select one Ravenwing mounted unit from your army in range of an objective marker that you control, and it gives you a sticky objective. This is fine.
Yes.
I'm not a huge fan of these. I find that if I leave an objective, my opponent tends to put something on it, which kind of negates the stickiness. But there is utility in late game, especially as I said before, this army, you might end up with a few big bricks of models and then not all that much that's going to be going out there and scoring for you. So having it in your back pocket is, nice to have. Finally, we do have the last strat, which is Talon Strike. Now, this is the banger. This is, you select it in either your shooting phase or any fight phase, and you select one Ravenwing mounted unit, and as long as they're targeting an infantry character or mounted character unit, add one to the wound roll. With the way that keywords work, this means that if you're shooting at a Wraith Brick, for example, that has a character in there, that gives you +1 to wound against the entire squad because the squad has inherited the character keyword. This doesn't let you bring down character knights in the way that 8th and 9th edition Ravenwing were so good at doing. But it's fine. You're not seeing Imperial Knights anyway, so don't worry about it. It does mean that a lot of the tough units to kill, for example, Terminators or Wraiths, will be led by a character. So it's going to be fairly regularly giving you +1 to wound where you want it. The downside of this is you're probably going to be shooting your Black Knights and their Plasma Talons. You're probably going to be wounding on 2s and 3s anyway. But if your opponent has a defensive -1 to wound, a lot of tough units that run with characters do. If your strength is higher than their toughness, or if you really want to make sure something's dead, throw enough dice as a problem, make that Wraith unit go away. I quite like it. And this is something that I'm seeing myself using quite regularly into the tough targets. Any thoughts on the stratagems there other than what we covered?
Not really. They're
No,
quite by the numbers, and I kind of
yeah.
like that. Sometimes you want a detachment to do what it says on the tin.
Mm,
It's throw a load of vehicles and bikes headlong into people and just
yes.
hope you don't bounce.
Yes, yeah, there is that. So the list we have gone for, turn 1 tabling, and the name is pretty apt, I think. So the main premise of the list is you've got 3 units of Black Knights joined by 3 command squads. Each one of them has one of the good enhancements. You've got one unit that's going to be starting off the board and strat reserving in turn 1. You've got one unit that gives you a 9-inch scout move, and then you've got one unit that gives you advance and charge. We didn't fit Samael in here because you can't join Samael to a unit that has the command squad already. And when I was weighing up the options, I thought I prefer having the additional 3 plasma talons over what Samael brings. It's not wrong to change out Samael for one of the command squads here, but personal preference, I wanted to get more guns into the into the battle as soon as possible. Then we've got handful of scoring units we'll get to in a second, but we've got 2 Storm Raven gunships and 2 Whirlwinds. So the conceit behind this list is that if you go second, you try and play a more standard game, try to win as much as possible. I see the win rate of this going second being much lower than if you go first, but I think it's still got the tools to succeed. If you go second, you're going to scout a unit that you've deployed on the line behind a forward ruin, try and get out of line of sight. You're going to keep the other unit that's in reserve until maybe a more apt time comes in, whether that's turn 1, turn 2. The Storm Ravens are going to be sat behind like a back L ruin. They're also -1 to wound. They're surprisingly tanky for aircraft, and everything's going to try and start quite hidden. However, if you go first, you just put your foot in the accelerator and you don't stop until it hits the metal. The way I see this list playing if you go first is you scout one of the bricks of Raven Wing 9 inches forwards. Then you advance and move and advance them. They're getting +1 to their advance and charge rolls from having the command squad attached anyway. So you're quite likely to be able to get into your opponent's deployment zone, get an angle on something squishy, threaten to be on their deployment, their actual objective on turn 1. You're going to bring in another squad of Black Knights in command from reserves. You're probably going to be able to get an angle onto something maybe in the back corner into their big L. If you're playing on UKTC, you'll probably be able to position them so at least 2/3 of the unit can shoot into whatever they're trying to hide. And then the third unit probably just pushes up to support, doesn't necessarily get into the thick of it. Maybe you're able to advance and charge depending on if your opponent mispositions some forward deployed scouts. And then you fly 2 Storm Raven gunships into your opponent's deployment zone. The name of the game is how much of my opponent's army can I kill on turn 1 before they get a turn? And I think the answer is quite a lot of it. How are you feeling about this, John?
So in 9th edition, when the Dark Angels Codex first dropped, I was playing quite a heavy skew of Ravenwing, and that's exactly what the army did. And it narratively feels like what Ravenwing should do. And this list I look at and go, cool. Half the time it works, half the time it doesn't. Live and die by the coin flip, and I love that. It just feels like this is kind of got the feel to how the detachment and then as a result the list plays that I don't get from Stormlance. Stormlance feels like, cool, I can have any marine unit advancing and charging. It doesn't have the tricks to make it feel a bit more rapid, whilst all these enhancements do. And I feel like that gives you kind of the thematic kind of edge on it, which I'm not sure you're going to see it at top tables. I feel like you're going to get people like me that have got a bucket load of Black Knights sat in a box, fishing them out and just going, I'll go to an RTT, and they'll go 2-1 with it and have a great time, and it'll be good fun. And that's it really for me. It's like it seems like a cool option, but I don't feel it's the strongest option.
I'm very interested to see how it does, because the amount of firepower you can put into your opponent's hidden models on turn 1 is kind of disgusting.
Yeah.
And then not only that, you can potentially advance and charge with the unit that doesn't get to move quite as far. So you can potentially tie up your opponent's models in their deployment zone, so they can't even really strike back at you very comfortably. So I think this is a list that if it goes first against all but the tankiest armies, you are causing a significant amount of issue. I also don't think this is necessarily a GT winning list, but it definitely feels like a spoiler list. It's the sort of list that you come up against and go, well, sure, I hope I don't go second. The way that you beat a list like this, a mounted list, is to stop them from leaving their deployment zone with your scouts, which is why there are 2 units of scouts here. I'm talking from UKTC experience, but I'm sure all mission packs are fairly similar in what I'm about to say. Every deployment zone has at least 2 exits that you can get large vehicles or bricks of bikes out of. All you have to do in your deployment is use your scouts to screen one of those off to stop your opponent from getting into position. Perfect. You throw away 65 points and you allow 1,935 points to get out of your deployment zone and do what it needs to do. It's very hard to shut this list down when you've got the forward screening units as well. But yeah, if you do play this list, or if you play any variation of this list, please do let us know in the comments. I'm very excited to see how this is going. A few of my team have been brewing lists around this concept, so I'm definitely going to be playing against it more than I get to put it on the table myself. But thank you for watching. As always, if you enjoy our content, please do subscribe. We've got a new one of these coming next week where we'll be talking about the base detachment, the index detachment for Dark Angels, the Unforgiven there. We have got a Discord. We'll be putting the list in Discord as well if you'd like to chat about the list, if you think it can be refined anymore. And as I say, we'll be back next week.